So let's look at how we cost a franchise, or how we cost any type of business. A business is costed on the basis, typically, unless it's a very, very high growth business like Apple or Tesla or something like that, a business is costed based on goodwill times 3.5, okay, which is 3.5 years payback of the goodwill. Now the goodwill is the net profit after the primary employee role, which the new business owner takes over, has been paid for. In other words, if they hired somebody to take over and do that role, plus 20%, then that role would be covered by this amount of money. The profit above that is in actual fact the goodwill. That figure times 3.5 equates to the value of that business. Now it's the same thing if you're selling a franchise. If you're selling a franchise, you're selling the goodwill value of the business times 3.5. In other words, you need to already know and understand exactly how much money that business is making, guaranteed, not just a guesstimate, it's guaranteed. You've got figures proving that this is the amount of money, it's a steady income, it works all year round, okay, no seasonal highs and lows, works all year round, and it guarantees this amount of money every single month, month in, month out, right? That amount of money, less of course what it costs to hire somebody to do that role, which of course you've stipulated in your contract that they cannot hire somebody to do that role, they must do the role themselves, they must work in the business. The profit minus the cost of that role equals the goodwill factor. That figure then becomes the value of the franchise that you're selling. So for example, if you're selling a business that has $1,000 per week goodwill figure, remember this is the profit less the cost of hiring somebody to do the role that the owner's taking over to do, then that equates to 48, because there's 52 weeks of the year, but they take 4 weeks holiday, which equals 48 weeks of the year. So that $1,000 times 48, which equals $48,000 times 3.5, which, as you can easily figure out, is somewhere around about the $160,000, $170,000 mark. So that means this franchise is worth $160,000, $170,000, plus whatever other material costs are required. For example, plant, equipment, buildings, trucks, vehicles, stock, primary stock holding, etc., that's required to set that business up and get it running. So you're not just selling the goodwill value, you're actually selling the stock plus the goodwill value, or equipment plus the goodwill value. That's how a business is priced. So that's how a franchise is priced. Now the amazing thing about a franchise is if you get one set up correctly and you've done everything right, the banks will literally fund somebody into that franchise. So the person buying the franchise might require only a very small deposit to actually get in and get all of that money to pay you to buy that franchise. But you will get all of that money up front on the day the franchise is sold. So this can obviously be used for, first of all, setting that person up in business and making sure all the marketing's in place and all the customers in place to get them started up and running. But also it funds the growth of your business moving forward so that you can start to ramp your business up, building centralized facilities for better operations and for better management, better efficiency, etc., so your business gets ramped up. This means your business can actually grow exponentially at that point in time. But more than this, of every franchise, remember you are doing all the client acquisition, client retention, management systems, marketing, accounting, okay, all the logistical systems, all the staff management systems, everything, all the stock management systems. You're doing everything. So that system, all of that has a value to it and a cost to it. And of course, there's going to be things like leasing of buildings, leasing of vehicles, all of those sort of things. But all of that systems has a cost to it. So a cost for you to run it, but also a cost for the franchisee to use it. So you are now charging a portion of the profit, the net profit per week that franchise is making. So let's say the franchise is making a $2,000 a week profit. You might be taking 50% of that. This means that the franchisee gets $1,000 a week profit. Remember, this is after replacing themselves, the cost of replacing themselves if they needed to. So So now you're taking of the profit, might be $2,000 a week comes out of that franchise, you're taking 50% of that for all of the running costs, all the marketing, all the management, all the systems, everything like that, which you are doing for the franchisee. They are taking half of it, which is their profit portion of it, and it's that half that you work your goodwill out of, not the whole amount. That half is what you work the goodwill out of. So now you're not only getting an upfront fee of some $150,000, $160,000, $180,000 plus costs, but you're also getting an ongoing income of, remember, 48 weeks, not 52 weeks of the year, $48,000 every single year, ongoing for life, out of that franchise to operate that franchise. Now, of course, some of that is going to be cost. You're going to have marketing costs, accounting costs, systems upgrade and building costs and customization, etc., etc. But most of that's going to be profit for you. So now you can look at selling, for example, $160,000 every month to set up a new franchise, and that increases your bottom line income by another $48,000 a year. It's actually gold for nothing. It's printing money. But you've got to have the business set up correctly first. Your primary goal is to make sure that business is set up correctly with all the systems in place working perfectly, and you've maximized the output of that business so that it's always going to make this money that you've claimed it's going to make. You've got all the documentation, all the evidence in place, all the electronic documentation evidence in place that shows exactly how much this business is making over what time frame, what your model business is doing, so that you're not just guesstimating these are real world numbers. And it's only on those real world numbers that you can actually sell one of these franchises. The key to setting up one of these types of franchises is your vision. Without the right vision, you're never going to do the planning required in the beginning to get that vision right. If you keep on thinking, look, nobody can afford $150,000, $160,000, $180,000 or plus equipment, which might end up being, $250,000 or $300,000 and $450,000, then you actually fail to do the planning required in the beginning to make the business worth that much money. You underplan the business. Now what you're doing is you're setting yourself up to fail. Because what ends up happening is you underplan the business, you don't get the customer retention right, you don't get the customer acquisition right, you don't get the marketing and the systems, staff management, etc. right in the beginning. So the business doesn't actually get optimized in the beginning. So now the model business that you have, which is the one you run, that's not running optimally. So now the value of your business has massively dropped, and when you take away the cost of replacing yourself, for example, to hire somebody to do the primary role, you end up having no profit. There's no net profit there, because if you take the cost of hiring somebody plus 20% and then the margin is above that, then you actually have no net profit left in the business at all. So you have no goodwill. So now you're just trying to sell a bit of equipment and justifying the value of the business based on nebulous branding or something like that, and it's a bit of equipment, and saying that's the value of the business. Well, that's no value at all, really, in real terms. So the person's not going to hand over their life savings, go into huge big debt with a bank in order to pay you a whole lot of money that's for nothing, essentially. This is where you need to plan correctly. This is what I need to do properly. I need to set up proper systems and procedures, build a proper business, and then I can franchise. All my planning down here is done properly, so then I can sell it for this much money. You don't do the planning, you don't get the success, and it's like planning for a small business here. You will eventually fail. You'll just miss out on that dream. You'll miss out on that goal. So get your planning right in the beginning, and then you'll build a proper franchise, and then you sell it, and it's like printing money. It's a gold mine. It's really worth an awful lot of time and effort to invest into it to get it right at the beginning, because this is how you build a future for you and your family. Easy.